Hey, welcome to Manalizing. This is where men talk about the kind of stuff that men don't talk about. Put your hard hat on, get ready for a ride. Here we go. Lauren Busch, welcome to Manalizing. You know, Manalizing is generally about men's stories, but we have a lot to learn where it comes to women. And well, we just have a lot to learn. You are the brains in the room. And if you want to talk to somebody who has the cranial matter rocking, you talk to Lauren. And should I say you're a nurse or a former nurse? Former nurse. You let the license expire because you have another path you've chosen. Yep. How many kids you've got? Let's talk for a minute about your family.
I have 9 amazing kids. My oldest just turned 18 a couple days ago. And the youngest is 3, and we've got everything in between.
18 to 3, 9 kids. Yep. Mom of 9. For a while there, your Instagram was like mom of 7 and then mom of 8.
I gave up. I was like, just go with my name.
Lost count. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of kids in there, yeah, and they make noise and they have to be fed. Oh, yes. What would you say? And you grew up in Delaware?
So part of my childhood in Delaware, part in Florida, then back to Delaware. So between the 2 states.
What's your favorite place of the 2?
I have different favorites for different reasons. I loved Florida. I love the beach. I love the sun. I also like having 4 seasons. Having palm trees at Christmas time is just definitely not the same.
Oh, I could totally do palm trees at Christmas time.
I want the pine trees. I want the snow. I like the different experiences. So different reasons to love both places.
And what's your favorite thing to do when you've got time on your hands? If I told you had a week and I gave you an unlimited budget, what would you do with that time?
Something with my kids. There's a lot of them, and they are noisy, and they do need to be fed quite often, but they are a lot of fun to be around. I'd find some way to combine some kind of adventure, some kind of learning, because I thrive in the learning environment. I love it. I find ways to learn new things all the time. And my kids and my husband, and if I could mash all that into one experience, it'd be my ideal week.
I'm a little shocked that you didn't say Tahiti or...
I would probably go to Tahiti, but there would probably be things that I would like to learn while I'm there. I want to learn about the environment and the history of the islands and the people and their culture. Mm-hmm. I just like information.
You like it. So a vacation for you could be someplace where you just have some time on your hands and you get to, would it be a library? Is it time on the internet studying? Is it a book?
I like listening to my books. I used to have more time to actually sit and read and hold a book. I think that's still my favorite experience, but for the sake of time, listening while I'm multitasking definitely fits in my schedule a lot better. And I don't know about a library. I actually really love conversing and learning from people. I think there's a difference between information written in a book and people sharing that information applied to experience. And I think that I absorb that and I retain it better when I have it applied to some kind of life experience a little bit better.
So you would rather learn from a person who has experiences than learn from a book?
Yes.
This does not surprise me.
That's me. I don't go on the internet and read things. Like I do research a lot of things on the internet, but even then I'll look for like the piece of information, but then I want to see how it's applied. I don't want to just see it as a fact. I need to see how it integrates or impacts someone's life experience better. And that for me, it's like a filter that I like to place on things.
Factoids are not interesting. I've always watched Jeopardy with, kind of a skewbald eye. I was like, why would somebody need to know what is being asked and answered here? These are facts, but they're completely useless.
Flashcards are not my thing.
And I'm like, why would somebody A, learn this, and B, be interested in hearing somebody else spout useless information?
Absolutely.
So that's not your thing. And if it's learning from the foibles and travails of other people, who's your favorite person to learn from? What was one of your favorite stories?
Oh, again, I have a hard time just choosing one. I think that there are, um, for example, one of my favorite stories that I love to share is about my Uncle Jeff.
Mhm.
And this isn't, again, most people are like, oh, this really smart person who's been through these great things. My uncle actually struggled with addiction throughout his life. And I remember as a teenager, my now husband, my boyfriend, and I at the time, we would actually go down and we would pick him up off the streets of Baltimore. We would bring him back home, and he'd stay for us a couple days in between his methadone treatments. And I remember him, um, I remember this one time sitting in a room with him, and he just kind of went blank, and he like passed out mid sentence. And I remember this thought inside my head going, "So I'm gonna cry just because it's a bad
Crying
thing
is
to think.
perfectly allowed on
It's a
this
bad
show.
thing to think about family, but I remember being embarrassed. I remember being like slightly disgusted, and I'm like, "How'd you do this to yourself? Like, do you need a camera? Like, do you need to see like what drugs have turned you into? Like, why did you choose this path? Because he, in his heart, he was one of the most caring, loving, passionate people. And to see someone that you see greatness in, to see them in pieces, to see them in that state, I think it makes it harder because if you see somebody doesn't have potential, you're like, whatever, they didn't really waste anything. But I knew his heart. And I, like, my biological father took off right before I was born. My uncle was the one that gave me my first bath. Like, every time he saw me, he told me how loved I was, like genuinely a really good person, but to be living on the streets, addicted to heroin, in and out of treatment, in and out of jail, like that's my whole growing up experience was visiting him in and out of jail. He was clean again. He wasn't clean. Like that whole experience. And then to see him just like melt into a pile, I remember feeling disgust. And then I had this voice come into my head and he said, he chose this path so that those around him could learn lessons from it. We have to see what not to do at times to know what to do. And it was like my correction. Like, you have no right to judge him, but you do have a right to learn from him and what he'd been through. And what I didn't know at that stage, and much later, I ended up talking to my mom and like all these things after he passed, um, that he was sexually abused as a teenager. And that was his way of numbing and forgetting what happened to him was his drug use. And so, again, there's a correction like, okay, this is where we need to heal. This is something that has run in the family long enough. And you have a choice. You have a choice to either heal, you have a choice to make a course correction for your own life. You can't shove it down. You can't just ignore that things happen, or this is the path that you're also going to follow down. And so for me, again, it's not these brilliant, smart people that are book smart. It's the life experiences that we can all learn into. And then from that, I'm able to spend time researching how do you heal? How do you find the the path that helps you work through the traumas that you've experienced, help other people? What is the long-term impact of not doing it? Say addiction doesn't come into my life for that choice, but other things, what is the long-term impact? And so that's where I do dive into the research, and I do like going down the rabbit holes on the internet and say, okay, what else can stem off of this so I can help other people learn the lessons that I'm learning at the same time.
How do you heal? I'm going to steal that. Those are some strong words. And for men, you also mentioned another one of our of men's favorite pastimes, and that's shoving things down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we talk about that on every show, and how we're trash compactors, and we shove it down and we shove it down until there ain't no more shoving, and then we blow up, and it comes out like puke, and it's unpleasant, and then there are victims.
Absolutely.
And shoving it down doesn't work, but how do you heal does. And I've talked to a number of guys, Todd, who we both know very, very well. I think if there was an award for coolest man on the planet, that dude would be a strong candidate.
Absolutely.
And his method of dealing, he came on here, and his is one of my favorite podcasts. But he talked about how his method of dealing was Jack Daniels. And he talked about why that didn't work for him, surprisingly. Who would have thought that good old buddy Jack wasn't the answer?
Yeah. Not therapy in a bottle.
So what you just told me is that one of your your favorite ways to learn is from people, and one of your favorite people to learn from is a guy who was an addict and on the streets
Yeah.
and in jail.
Yeah.
That's going to surprise some people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that we're placed in the experience of community, in families, in our friendships to learn from each other. And I think that again, knowledge without application, it doesn't have the same impact. But if you have applied knowledge and you get to see long-term impacts, short-term impacts, and you get to see the realities of choices, I think that that can have a greater impact for good, for change, can be more inspiring in life than just facts on a page.
Mhm.
I don't think most of us, I think it has to hit the heart for us to have the action. If it hits the head, you're like, nice to know. Thank you.
I want to hear another story about somebody else who you learned from because your first at bat was pretty darn good.
Okay, so another person that um, I've learned from. So there's Heinz Kegi. He's a long time friend of our family.
Oh
He's
yeah,
been around.
I've met him.
You've
He's
met
from
him,
like Germany, right?
Switzerland. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Incredibly brilliant, surrounded by some of the most amazing human beings from a psychology standpoint on the planet. I've loved learning from him for a different reason. For me, his whole career, he's traveled the globe. He's interacted with people in almost every country, at the highest point in their careers, some at their lowest point in their careers, like asking to turn things around. He's watched people who have gotten stuck in the muck of their past, and that's prohibited them from moving forward and helped them work through that. And so I've really enjoyed learning from him because he has the perspective of different cultures, different communities, different people from all different walks of life, and that merging of that knowledge where it all comes together. Seeing that we're not so different, seeing that it doesn't matter if you're at your highest or your lowest, we all experience the same struggles. I've really enjoyed that, and also the different lens of cultures. Again, European culture is very different than American culture. So the way that they
Mhm.
perceive the struggles or community impacts into our lives is very different. And so that's been something that's been really fun to learn from.
Yeah, I was just listening to a book on audio, Audible,
Yeah.
and she was talking about that in one of the sections she was doing. Apparently, if you go to um, I forget if it was China or Japan or both, but if you're taking a business card from them, you do that with both hands.
Oh, wow.
And if you're getting off the plane, they're going to be in suits. You better be in a suit.
Yeah.
And at the same time, if you're dealing with someone from the Middle East, they're not going to do anything with both hands because the left hand apparently is dirty. It's less than. And so I find that fascinating
Yeah.
and mind boggling. And yeah, I don't do that. And there's probably good reason for that. Such a simple guy that I'm like, this has always worked for me for the last 1,000 years.
Yep. Yep.
You said something like, we're all the same. I'm going to say that some of our experiences are different. The pain that we feel is perhaps similar.
Absolutely.
Uh, for example, and I've not mentioned this on a podcast before, but I went through, it's called Great Life. It's one of those self help courses that last for a few weeks. And I had my own insecurities. I was sure that people didn't want me there and that I was a somewhat ish welcome person in the room. And so we were talking about that and trying to get to the one insult that cut the most. And for me, after some exploration, I remembered my mom calling me that damn kid. And, my mom was an angel, except for when I was that damn kid. And I was like, she could at least remember my name. Um, and and so for the rest of the exercise, people referred to me as that damn kid. And it kind of worked because it's really hard to hurt my feelings anymore because I've been to the bottom and survived that. Uh, Still, um, it hurt. It, there was a day when that really hurt. What sort of pain uh, are you dealing with or have you dealt with?
Well, like I mentioned, my uncle's story. So sexual abuse actually runs in my family. I'm not sure that I have a single family member from the generation prior to me that didn't experience it on some level, and sadly, it's worked its way into current generations. So that's probably been a huge focus of mine is why is that become so prevalent? So it's the statistics right now are 1 in 4 girls will be sexually abused. Most often as a child, it's usually under the age of 18, and 1 in 13 men. So statistics aren't so great for men either. So it's something that's very prevalent in our society in America. It's actually 1 in 3 globally, so it's worse outside of American culture, but
Oh,
in
wow.
our culture, it's very prevalent and at very young ages. And it's I think 80% of the time it's a close family member or friend. So it's something that has impacted multiple people that I really love and care about, something that's impacted me personally, something I have 4 daughters. I have 5 sons, like it's statistics that I would like to change to be able to battle against. And I think that the best way that I can learn or become passionate about is it was something since I experienced it. I know the damage it causes, I know the pain that it causes. And so, because of that, it makes me a better protector of my children. But also, I don't want my kids to live in a bubble. I want my kids to experience life, maybe not to experience the same trauma that I've experienced, but I want them to get out in the world. I totally don't want to
They
keep
need
them.
different trauma than that.
I prefer a different experience. Yeah, let's have a little different learning moment, please. We don't need to pass this on any further. Whatever we haven't learned so far, I'd like my kids to learn it without the experience of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Todd again talks about that in his thing about how to protect your family. We did a separate podcast with him about back in the day about how to protect your family from being sexually trafficked or human trafficked.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's, you know, I can't begin to guess how much that must invade your life. And I think, even the statistics that you provided are probably way low.
Oh, it's highly underreported.
Yeah,
Highly underreported.
because yeah, how many people report that? And if there's that many people that report that, yeah. So, for example, in college, I had a few girlfriends because once they got to know me, they dumped me. That's what I decided. Um, but I had a few that I got close enough to find out, whether they'd been sexually assaulted. Every one of them,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's
Mine,
frightening.
mine wasn't reported. My generations before me, nobody. It was never reported. And I think even now, I mean, they're working to change the laws on statute of limitations, but even statute of limitations, when you know that reporting it by the time that you feel like you can face it,
Uh-huh.
but what comes out of that? And if nothing can come out of it, what's the point about bringing that up? What's the point about facing that damage yet again and digging uncovering something that's been rotting and molding in the ground? Like you don't want to uncover it again because nothing's going to in your mind, nothing's going to happen. Nothing better becomes of it. So it's better to just leave it where it lies. The damage happened there. Let's not revisit that moment and dig it back out of the earth, right? So yeah, I agree. It's highly underreported, and statistics are alarming enough with what the report rate is.
Now that you mention, let's not revisit it and dig it up and it's moldy and let's let it stay moldy. Do you want to revisit it and unmold it?
Yes. So I don't think that the details
Hmm.
matter. I think that the what I'd love to focus on is I'd like to draw or create a better picture of what the impact is,
Right.
especially because with the statistics of 1 in 4 girls, the likelihood that any man listening to this podcast is going to have a woman in their life that they love and they care very much about that has been down this path, having a better understanding of how to support her or what she's going through. I was just, in my head picturing like for my husband, if I were to just look at him and his 4 daughters, the statistic says that one of his 4 daughters will have to go through. So as a father, he needs to understand this so he can support his daughter. So even as big and as scary and as protective as he is, the statistics are one of our 4 daughters will experience it, right? If you don't have 4 daughters
Or two,
or 2, yeah, or more,
or
right?
three.
If you go
Yeah.
for the reporting, the underreporting, right? If you don't have 4 daughters, what's the likelihood between your mom, your grandmother, an aunt, and a coworker? Like, people that you interact with on a daily basis have experienced this type of trauma, and it's going to impact them and their relationship and their interactions with you consciously or subconsciously. It's just going to come out. So I think the important part is, I would just like to paint the picture of what that looks like
Right.
throughout the lifespan, right?
Let's do that.
So my first the first time that I was assaulted was when I was 12 years old. At the time, it was somebody very close to me. It was somebody that everybody thought, no, this could never happen. In fact, to the point when I came forward and I told, I was laughed at. Like, literally, like, there's no way, you totally misunderstood, must have been a bad dream. And so that was a secondary trauma of like, I already didn't understand what was happening. I knew something bad was happening because of how it felt inside, but I didn't know how to word it. I either worded it incorrectly or I just totally misinterpreted what just happened as something, maybe I did make it up, right? So doubting yourself. And unfortunately, that led to it happening several more times to the point where I'm like, okay, I know this is bad. I know that this is something that shouldn't be happening. And luckily, it did stop for me. And I got to the point because I had been not believed that it wasn't worth discussing again. It wasn't worth talking about, to the point where I buried it. And it was like, it wasn't even like a thought in the back of my mind. I could interact with this person without that even like coming to mind. It was like, oh yeah, that never happened. Obviously, like, I just misunderstand what was happening, right? Then come the time where I get married, because it happened to me while I was sleeping twice. I get married. I have a husband that's in bed with me. In the middle of the night, he wants to put his arm around me. And it's immediately all these emotions, it's immediately all these feelings that I couldn't understand because I had buried something so deep that I was like, what in the world? Like, why am I disgusted that my husband just tried to put his arm around me while we're sleeping? Like, that should be something that's like, wonderful. I'm protected. No, I was like absolutely disgusted. And so as you're interacting with these women, there are going to be things that are triggers, there'd be reminders. That might seem like a more obvious one. Yes, somebody put their arm around you while you were sleeping, where you thought like you were safe and no one should touch you, right? Like, but somebody else, it might be a drink, it might be a smell, it might be a tree that they see, or a house that they see, or a barn. Like, it could be anything visually, any of the five senses, and there's a trigger. And if they're not self-aware enough to relate it back to when the trauma happens, they're immediately going to latch it onto you because you're the only thing that's there. And all of a sudden, I feel this way, and I'm going to blame you because you were there. And I don't know why I'm feeling this way other than I'm with you, and here it is, right? So it definitely takes a level of self-awareness. And then also for for you as a male, like being there to realize, like, I'm not going to take this personal. I'm going to let you work through this, but also very persistent encouragement. That was a big thing that my husband was always good at. I had actually told my husband, he was aware. We got married at 19, so it wasn't like at 19 he was like, I know exactly how to handle this and process this, or encourage you to process or work through this, right? But through the years, there have been moments that has come up over and over again, and that same trauma, and it was always persistent encouragement because my first experience of trying to get help was laughter. Anytime that my husband was like, "You need to get help," I was like, I don't want help because help is mean. Help doesn't believe me. Help doesn't help, right? I don't want to tell
Yeah,
anybody else
you
about this.
tried help.
I tried help.
And you were laughed at.
Yes. Yes.
That's not fun.
No.
It's not just the event or the events itself, it's the memories and the fear. But I'm guessing. I guess I'm using words. What was that like?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's definitely PTSD because it's definitely going the minute that those feelings would come forward, it was being exactly back in the moment. It was it was like being bathed in all the emotions, all the senses, like at one time, and your body's just like on super high alert. And it would often like take days for me to be able to come out of it. And again, persistent encouragement. Hey, there are people that can help. There is ways that we can talk about this. Like, let's find the way that you can work through it without shaming me, without taking it personal. And that could have been a really easy thing for a man to feel very rejected. I'm just trying to like comfort my wife. I'm just trying to be next to my wife, and this is always triggering you. Like that could have been something that he took very personal, but he was a good enough man to be able to just step back and be like, "You're working through something. This isn't about me. It's about your experience, and I'm here to love you through it."
Okay, so what I want to do now is, given your expertise in so many categories, is I want to take some scenarios and have you walk us through. I want to have one scenario where it's like, okay, now I'm married to a woman who has been abused, and the PTSD shows up at random moments. The next one is going to be, um, I'm the dad and my daughter just got abused. And then we'll go from there.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's do that first one. How do you feel about that?
I love it. I love working through scenarios. So for me, what I found worked really well for me is because my first cry for help was rejected by somebody externally,
Uh-huh.
the idea of going back and asking for help outside was petrifying to me. That was another trauma that I had to deal with, right?
Uh-huh.
So it was one of the great things that John has always done is he also likes to find resources. Who can we talk to? Where can we find the help? And I actually found a lot of help in books. So there's a lot of audible books that work on like mindset, family genealogy, and trauma that travels that way. Um, where your mind doesn't control you, and also having a much higher understanding of the impact of our emotions. There's an amazing book. It's Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. We always think that time heals all wounds.
No,
No,
it
time,
amplifies them.
no, yeah, yes, because now we have other life experiences that kind of latched onto them. It just becomes this heavier weight of anchors dragging behind.
Yeah, and we all have our demons, and especially, I'm going to say especially for me, but I don't know if that's true. For me, anytime my mind goes into neutral, and as a guy, our minds go into neutral all the time. Then my demons come at me. Look at that stupid thing you did. Look at that stupid thing you did. You're hopeless.
Yeah.
Let's have you talk first to the child who just had that traumatic experience. She doesn't know what to believe, think, or do. She can't go to the people who should be able to provide her the answers because maybe they're complicit, maybe she doesn't trust them, maybe they're the problem. What do you tell that girl?
You know, for me personally, I can't say in every incident. Luckily for me, it stopped. Not every 12-year-old girl does it stop. It can be something they experience till adulthood, till they can get away, till they have some way of escaping, right? For me personally, the act itself wasn't something I understood. Like I can distinctly remember being asked uh, as an adult, "Do you know?" I'm gonna, I'm gonna say the words because it is what it is. "Do you know if he ejaculated?" And at 12 years old, I didn't know what that word meant. I didn't know what that was. And so as an adult to hear that word, to understand that that's what could have happened or did happen, it was reliving a trauma, right? So at 12 years old, the way that we process and experience a trauma at a level of a 12-year-old would understand sex, would understand um, that type of experience, it's very different than an adult. For me, the time that was bought to be older, to be able to process things was actually a blessing. Now again, the trauma stopped for me. I couldn't say that for the 12-year-old who still experiences it and experiences it often and until they can escape. Um, I would hope that she was brave enough to be able to reach out and get the help. Anybody who will listen, just don't stop talking.
Uh-huh.
Don't stop talking. Keep reaching out for the help. Um, One thing and this is probably more specific to our church culture is I did actually reach out to church help because I thought
Mm-hmm.
that's my next backup, right? I'm going to go to a
Right.
bishop. Unfortunately, our bishops are actually not trained to manage this. Like, it's not something that they're taught to handle. So when they were brought in, it was bring all the parties in and let's all discuss it together. And then
Oh
it was
dear.
like, do we all believe Lauren? Like it wasn't actually a good experience. So I did try multiple times, but for anybody else, reach outside of church, reach outside of the people that are not able to protect you. And oftentimes the teacher is a really great, can be an ally to other family members. I'm sure if I had reached out to other family members, hope would have been given, but
yeah. Do you believe that because you said nothing or your efforts at saying something weren't profitable? Do you believe that he continued to abuse others?
No. Unfortunately, what caused him to be what he was triggers from his own past. He was in and out of the foster care system and received the same type of abuse. And so he has always been very isolated and he misinterpreted what love looks like. That's not an excuse. What he did was wrong, but for him, this is what love is. This is how we show affection. This is how an adult treats a child. Like, he had some wiring gone wrong from his own past. I also became very hyper vigilant around him for my own protection, but it also watched out for other people. And I had led a very sheltered life, very protected. I was never not at the house, so it wasn't a situation where it was predatory out looking for people kind of experience.
Right. Let's go to the dad scenario. Let's say that you were doing a sleepover and you got abused over there by whoever, either somebody your age or the dad over there, and you're going to your dad now and you're telling the story and he believes you. We'll set the scenario up that far. What is your advice to that dad? He's going to want to just go grab his shotgun.
Yep. You can't protect a daughter that you're no longer with. You go grab the shotgun, you go attack that man, you're going to be put in jail as well.
Okay.
And so you won't be able to protect her beyond that moment.
Oh. My first thought is it's worth it. My second thought is
do you want it to happen again? Because the statistics on girls who are abused once, they end up becoming repeatedly abused because they end up feeling broken. They end up feeling used up and they don't set the same boundaries. So do you want to be able to protect her for the next 20 years or just get revenge? Because that revenge is really about you. It's not actually about your daughter.
That's true.
It's your emotion. It's your anger and you want to take it out on somebody.
Right.
In that moment, your daughter needs you by your side. And she's going to have to re-understand what safe contact looks like, what it's safe to be around my dad. And you're the one that's the best to teach her that men aren't the bad guys, that person was the bad guy, not all men, right? So your constraint, you're holding back and actually getting the right people involved is going to help her far more. Besides that, it won't actually make her feel better because the bad guy's taken out of the situation. They're still processing. Like the processing doesn't happen because the bad guy's eliminated. The processing, it needs therapy. So
processing is going to occur regardless.
Yeah.
And ideally, you're going to be there to help her process, as opposed to being in Supermax prison.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you mean it? So I can't hang him by his toes and then fillet him inch by inch?
Preferably not. She definitely needs you by her side, not locked up.
But think of all the fun I could have.
No, I know. I think a lot of people would have a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Second thought that comes to mind is Hitman, but same result.
There's still a very wise phrase, and that is hurt people hurt people. And so realizing that abuse is cyclical, it's not something that just comes out of nowhere. It's a really hard place to get to where you can have empathy for someone who has caused pain, but realizing that they are most often reacting out of programming that was put into them from their own experiences or from past generations, right? So there is this awesome study that was put out, I don't know, 2015 or so, they did this experiment with mice. And what they did was they sprayed the smell of a cherry blossom into the mice's cage, and then they shocked the wiring of the floor for the mice. And so the mice ended up learning anytime I smell cherry blossom, I know pain is coming. They were prepared for this response, right? Then they bred those mice. And the next generation, if they smelled cherry blossom, immediately had a PTSD response. Their bodies were programmed to know cherry blossom is pain. They found that for at least 3 generations, that same programming happened. So 3 generations of mice later smelled cherry blossom, PTSD response. Now, I've had children since my trauma.
Hmm.
And all of my children, not just my daughters, all 9 children now have the programming for a trauma response.
Oh man.
It's carried best on sperm. Men carry that programming better than women.
Uh-huh.
So the men who are the perpetrators are most often carrying trauma from generations past, at minimum of 3. So now just think about for you, for your generation, think about the Great Depression.
Uh-huh.
Was that grandpa or is that dad?
My dad was pretty young through that. He would have been about 19 in 1940. So yeah, he was a teenager through that.
Teenagers. That's a hard thing. And your grandfather went through it, right? So you just think about what extreme cultural traumas were happening, and then we have these additional traumas, these same statistics from generations past, the sexual traumas that are also coming forward. So we have that, right? There's programming that a lot of us don't even realize that we have, that we've been dealing with, that cause us to react or act in all the wrong ways. And we're like, I don't even know why. And nobody's talked about, like you said, underreported, right? This is an underreported thing. My grandmother didn't report it. My mom didn't report it. My great grandmother didn't report it. In fact, she ran a brothel out of her house. Like she was the reason it happened to her daughters, right? So like
Oh,
there's like massive trauma and programming that's been done on a genetic level that people aren't even aware of. And then they're like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, why did I do that? Like, I can't even explain. There's a lot of people that like the programming has been set. And again, it's not an excuse. It doesn't make it right. But at least having enough empathy to be like, something is wrong with you. You also need help. Like you need some therapy as well, right?
yeah, let's go that direction. Now you're talking to a man who is like, I have already raped somebody who was a child. I know it's wrong. I hate myself. I know I'm going to want to do it again next week. Help me.
You get help.
Where, how?
I mean, there is therapists that specialize in this. There's a lot of chemical castration options so that the urges aren't even there. I don't really know what the full rehab for someone in that instance is.
Uh-huh.
I do know that our society and the chemicals and the culture and the information available to reprogram us has set those people up for failure.
So chemical castration would work. I'm not sure how far, what the results are of chemical castration.
You have no libido, you have
None.
no drive.
You're a zombie.
Yes.
You're a drone.
You're a eunuch.
Okay. That would work.
That would work.
So a dude is going to go, I don't want to have that done to me. But then at least the engineer in me says, let's compare risk and reward.
Yeah.
You could be a drone for the rest of your life, or you could know that you are the person that caused another person and perhaps all of their grandchildren to live a life of, what's the word? Depression, um, hell. Let's go with hell.
Yeah.
And so you're going to trade that castration for someone else's hell and also your own.
I mean, hurt people, right? So they're living in their own form of hell. If they're really understanding the damage that they're causing,
Uh-huh.
they're living in their own form of hell and hurt other people, right?
Right.
So unless we all start getting the help and start understanding the programming that's already built into us and what that damage is doing, it's just cycles of hurt and pain repeating themselves.
Yeah. Now, what about the guy who goes, well, if everybody's doing it, then I'm another drop in the ocean. So why the heck not? What's your response?
Well, I mean, I feel like one person's impact, it's like you said, it's far reaching. Do we understand that it is causing generations of damage?
Uh-huh.
And I think that the better that we communicate that, I think the better that people learn that they realize that they're not a drop in the ocean. I mean, we have ripple effects for every decision we make. Whatever you ate for breakfast has ripple effects. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? So think about how far larger the ripple is when we have something like sexual assault that we've done to someone. That ripple effect is far greater. So I don't know that it's so much a ripple, not realizing that we have an impact. I think it's more, again, having that really honest conversation with you. Do I know why I do what I do? Do I know why I feel the way I'm feeling? Am I willing to like be introspective? Am I willing to question what I'm thinking, what I think I know to be true, what I think the right experience is? Are we willing to question that? And one of the other conversations I think ties into this. We talked about maybe doing this as a separate chat, but the whole testosterone levels dropping over
Uh-huh.
the last, I don't know, since early 1960s.
Right.
When we look at what that impact is on men's health and their mental health, one of the biggest feeders for pornography is men with depression. Men's testosterone levels drop,
Hmm.
men are depressed. Men turn to pornography. One of the biggest feeders for child sexual abuse, pornography. So we have to realize that all these things are tying together. These are all connected, and understanding what the impact is and being able to tie that back to, okay, if we're really going to past traumas, at 1% a year is what testosterone levels are dropping right now. So that started in 1980. So we're now 40% lower. A man at 50 right now, their
Ouch.
testosterone levels are 40% lower than men in 1980. Depression, it impacts so many aspects of health, but like you just take away a man's drive for life and things aren't going to fire right in the brain. And I think that so many times we look at hormones as like this singular chemical construct. It just has this one action, it just has this one purpose. Hormones control your brain. It controls the way it fires. It controls the way you think. Talk to any woman who's ever struggled with severe PMS. I'm sorry, I was just crazy when they come out of it, right? Like when we're in the middle of it, we're like, I don't know why I'm so angry. I don't know why I want to scream and yell. And like, it's out of control emotion.
Right.
So to not respect the fact that if that's also happening to men, that their brain is now going to be wired differently and they're going to react to the men and women in their lives differently. I just think that that's a
So
willful ignorance.
I have to, put out on the table right now. I've got a fresh new set of 9 testosterone pellets that have been shoved into my butt cheeks.
Yeah.
And there's a big old lump right where they are. They're trying to come back out. So I'm low on testosterone too.
Yep.
Um, the the whole testosterone thing, yeah, there was a day when before I figured out what was going on. And so I've got 2 strikes against me. First, I'm a man. Second is I'm an engineer. And so I figure that I can basically choose my emotion, and based on what's going on outside me, I can calculate how I feel about that.
Very engineer. I
Very
don't know all
engineer.
men think that way. That's very engineer.
And I feel like it's one of those things where if you tell me exactly what my surroundings are, I will tell you what my emotion is about it. And I'll usually tell you that I have no emotion because I'm an engineer. Um, and then there came a day when I was like, I'm feeling X, and there's no reason for that. There are sometimes when I can tell I'm low because I'll just go to one scenario after another. Again, when my mind is blank, and I'll go to, well, this happened 5 years ago, and that pissed me off, and I'm going to just sit in
Stew on
that,
it.
right? And then I actually find myself going, yeah, that was 5 years ago. Let's move on. And then 30 seconds later, I'm in another place where I'm like, oh, yeah, this is something that I'm really pissed about. And then I'll stew on that for a while. And I have to actually mentally pull myself out and say, no, we're going to live today.
Yes.
But I realized that I am not choosing my own emotions, and that just blows my mind.
Yeah.
So the testosterone does go a long way.
Oh, it goes a very long way. And again, one of the biggest things, like, I think for women, when we hear testosterone and we think of a man's sex drive going down, some of us might often feel relief. And it might be because of the statistics. We're like, thank you. I'm glad you're turning that off. I don't feel threatened by you anymore. I'm actually happy that your testosterone levels are dropping. Women have testosterone too. Our
Uh-huh.
drive also goes down. And actually, a healthy libido is a sign of vitality. Like, it's what drives all of us, not just men. But when men lose their testosterone, that drive, they're losing their drive for life.
Right.
It immediately means depression. And again, statistics show that men who view pornography have depression issues. They're using that as like their inspiration. Trying to feel something again is looking at pornography. And then you look at the same statistics for pornography, and it's fueling child sex abuse and sex trafficking. And so it's a really nasty, gnarly loop. And we're like, well, it's okay. At least his libido's dropped equal with mine. It's like, no, you want your husband to be like full swing because it's their protector mechanism, it's their provider mechanism. It is really the what inspires them to take every action in life, looking after, if they're raised properly, looking after the people that they're in charge of caring for. And as a woman, you don't want it to drop either. And we definitely don't want to step into this thing where we're like automatically just fielding men into this like lower mindset and over to pornography. And then we have this horrible cycle that we're trying to break, and the trauma and abuse just continues.
On the porn, I know a guy who I'm fairly close to who he got into porn enough that it cost him his marriage. And he was at one of the tribe meetings the other day,